everybody. We'll be finishing up the starting point tier 0 labs from last meeting. We already completed these first three. So all we have to do now is finish up Redeemer, and then we'll be able to do tier 1. So that'll be less just like interacting with services and more actually trying to abuse and or exploit them. So first I'm gonna need to actually connect to the VPN. So I here's my VPN. I think it's this one. So if I do this, all I have to do is run the open VPN command and specify the path, either relative or absolute, to my VPN profile, and hopefully I should be connected. Either that or I connected to the wrong VPN. Kind of suck. Oh no, I think yeah, that should work. And I'll wait for that to spin up. While that spins up, I'll just go over a little quick review of what we were going over from the previous boxes. Uh, we went over how to use Nmap, the network map scanning tool, to check for ports that are open on a computer, because ports are the way the computers communicate on a network level, and by extension, that's how we are able to actually interact and therefore exploit a computer remotely. For the first box, Meow, we accessed a telnet server and we simply just interacted with it and logged in with the default root user with no password. Uh, Not that realistic, but telnet is it's a rare service to find, but it does exist. For fun, we abused an anonymous SMB or FTP server. We were able to log in anonymously and grab the flag. And for dancing, we're able to do something similar to Fawn, where we were able to access an SMB share after scanning for it, and then access its shares through, I believe it was a guest user. And then from there, we just downloaded all the files and folders, and we got the flag. My box is up, so I'm going to do a ping test. And I can see I'm getting responses, so this is an indication that the box is alive. If just a reminder that even if the computer doesn't respond, so here I got a response, so I know I can actually hit it. Sometimes if ping is firewalled, I won't get a response, but the box might actually be there. Firewalls can block off ICMP, which is the protocol that ping uses, but they might not block other things, so that's just something to take note of. Just gonna do a full port scan with a high min rate just to get a quick uh, scan done, see what's running, or I mean what ports are open. The results from Nmap aren't always going to directly reflect the services on the computer. So I see it says Redis 6379, but to verify, since that's the only port open, I'll do TAC-P to specify that port. And I'm going to do a script and service version check on it. While that runs, we can answer the first question. It's port 6379. That's that right there. And we can see it's running Redis key value store 5.07. So now we're being asked, you guys happen to know what type of database Redis is? Well, the little hyphen here kind of gives it away, but yeah, it's an in-memory database. So what that means is that traditional databases are, well, there's multiple types. I mean, this one's an in-memory, but there's also something like SQL database and NoSQL databases are the most common things. I'll lump them in the same category. So SQL, NoSQL, and whatever. Those databases usually just store data uh in however you would imagine it. In for SQL, it uses a system of uh I believe tables, rows, while NoSQL databases do something like key value pairs, something similar to JSON, I believe. Uh, so Redis is an in-memory database, which means, from my experience with it, it sort of like caches the memory of whatever is utilizing Redis. So then that application can be running more efficiently. It's a bit weird. I don't understand it all too well myself, and I haven't really ran into it all that much. So yeah, the answer is in-memory database. And does anyone happen to know what command line utility we can use to interact with it? With FTP, we just ran the FTP command or the FTP binary. With dancing, there was SMB client and crackmap exec. And for Meow, we were able just to access it with either Telnet or Netcat, I believe. I'm not sure if Netcat actually worked. I don't remember. Well, if we Google this, how to connect to Redis from command line, since Google is our best friend, you can see, look, a lot of things are talking about Redis CLI, which happens to be the answer. Redis CLI. I believe the CLI just stands for command line interface. Um, as for so if I run the Redis CLI command, oh, I don't have it installed. So I'll just install that real quick. All right, let's try this again. So I type Redis CLI, and based on this notation, this is a relatively common notation that I see. It specifies like what host you're connected to or what host is listening, etc. on the left. So in this case, 127.0.0.1, or basically my computer, that's synonymous with like your local host or home address. And on the right of the colon is usually going to be the port. So I'm connected on uh my local computer on port 6379, which I don't really think makes all that much sense because if I check my ports open, I don't. Oh wait, I do have I do have a 6379. Oh, that's interesting. Anyways, but clearly I don't want to connect to my own Redis thing because I'm not trying to exploit myself. So, next question says, what flag do we specify? And flags are the little things we specify with the tax or the double tax. And it says, what do we use to specify the host name? Well, we just happen to look around. It looks like host name is with tac H or minus. I call it a tac, and the default is localhost, which makes sense because I accidentally connected to myself. I do Redis CLI. Oops. Uh, and then I specify, let's see, what's the host? This guy. I'm connected. Now, does anyone actually know how to get information and statistics about this Redis server? Sometimes typing in help into a client tool will return some commands, and sometimes it doesn't, but I'll just roll with the odds. And it doesn't look like we get too much. Oh, but we can tab autocomplete to actually see what potential uh, topics we could or list of group of commands. Pretty convenient. Um, but anyways, I'm going to Just Google Redis CLI how to get information about server. Looks like we could type info, so I'm gonna type info. And yeah, that definitely looks like that's a lot of info. I don't use Redis at all, so I have no idea what majority of this means, if anything at all. I mean, I know that I guess this points to where the config file and the executable is, but aside from that, oh, it looks like we also have a host name, or not host name, an operating system version. So looks like the answer for this one is just going to be info. Uh, as for the Redis server version, we could just go back up to our scan result. And that one says 507. What if I put a question? Okay, yeah, it still doesn't show me any commands. That's relatively inconvenient. Notice how the client is, or my Redis CLI, or basically my client tool is version 6, but the actual server itself is version 507. So it says what command do we use to get desired database, but I don't know if we actually know what databases exist. So maybe if we go through the info, we can find something about database. Doesn't look like there are any. So get databases. To list databases. In other databases like SQL, you could there's explicit commands like show databases, and it shows you all the databases related to the server or hosted by the server. Okay, so if I run config get databases, it looks like I can actually list. So it looks like we have databases and oh wait, no, this just lists the count of the databases. You can use the following command to list database for which. Alright, so if I run info key space, oops, I can get list databases which keys are defined. So it looks like there's a database called DB0, and there are, I think this is a database, and there's 4 keys associated with this. So select, what if this goes over select? Nope. So Redis CLI, so, oh wait, looks like you just do select. So select DBO or 0. Oh, okay. So DB is the prefix for database and 0 is the actual ID. I could just use select 0. And oh, how that happened. Um, okay. Let's see. Yeah, so we just run select. And within database with index 0, we saw that there are 4 keys. So it's just gonna be 4 here. Now we need to figure out how can we actually grab keys. Grab keys. Keys. Keys 0 maybe? No. Get keys of an index or database Redis. Just run keys. No, it's gonna complain. Oh, we do get. So I do get 0 or no. Oh, I run keys asterisk. Okay, so I guess there's, I mean, it's a bit confusing since I didn't, oh, it's because all right, so I select the database for, we selected the database first with select 0, the 0th index, and then when we do keys wildcard, it returns to us all the keys within this database that we select. So it's a bit similar to MySQL if anyone's worked with that. So you, looks like you just do keys asterisk. Yeah. And then I believe we could just then do get three or get flag because flag is the name of this key and the flag is whatever this is. Okay. So for reference, all of these boxes were relatively simple. It was simply just like we scan and we find a server and we connect to it, and that was essentially the task. It takes a understanding of how that usually works before we can actually exploit, because to exploit something, you probably need to figure out how to access it, right? So for in the terms of a Redis server, where we figure out how to use Redis CLI, in terms of a SMB share, use SMB client or crack map. For FTP, there's the FTP tool. For Telnet, there's Telnet. For web servers, you have your browser. For MySQL databases, you have the MySQL command line. So it's all mostly the same. You just have to do a little bit of research into what you're trying to attack and then find an associated client tool to access it. Sometimes they come in a lot of different ways and they have a lot of different weird commands like in the case of Redis, but at the end of the day it all kind of boils down to just do you understand like the client tool and what are you capable of doing as the client to the server, and then from there you can figure out how to either exploit manually or whatnot. I'm going to stop this machine now, exit out CLI, and now we can go on to dealing with tier one. So uh, they actually added a new box to tier one, I believe. Yeah, it's this three thing. I heard it's AWS related. Not too sure. Uh, but yeah, I didn't get around to doing it. So, anyways, I believe we'll be starting off with appointment. So just gonna spawn the machine. Looks like there's still a lot of tasks in each of these, so we'll be walking along the tasks. I'll let that spin up for a bit. Okay, box is up. Doing another ping test. I think by default Windows doesn't respond, but Linux does. So maybe that's a little indicator from the ping. But for the most part, you just run a scan and see what services are on there to determine what type of host I'm dealing with. Okay, it says it's just HTTP. For the most part, that's going to mean a web server, and most of the times web servers hardly have any sort of inherent vulnerabilities. There's, I think, like only two I could think of, and they're incredibly old. So, but I'll just run the service version and script scan just to see maybe what type of web server we're dealing with. While we do that, I'll access web server through my URL bar. And it looks like we have a what do you call it? Login page. And most of these components seem a bit static, except the login part. It prompted this. Uh, yeah, I can view the HTML and it looks pretty bare. There's not too much stuff, just some JavaScript and CSS. Just looking around. Yeah, I can see that if I hover over the forget password, there's just a pound sign, which means that it doesn't do anything. It's not sending a request or anything anywhere. Looks like we're dealing with an Apache web server. A lot of common ones are like Apache and then Nginx. I don't really see too much of a distinction from the offensive viewpoint. There's not too many differences between them unless they're being used for more complex reasons such as reverse proxying, but that's a lot of scope for this. For now, we can focus on the login page. So if anybody has any idea of what to do right here, something that we can try out, I'll let you guys take a guess for that one. Well, we could try default passwords or like common combinations. So I'll try something like admin password, maybe. Doesn't really do anything. I'll maybe try admin. Also doesn't look like it's doing anything. I don't want to try it too many times in case they might like block me. Sometimes things will do that as an anti-brute force mechanism. Let's go back to the questions to see if they can potentially guide us to what we should be looking at here. So, okay. Does anyone actually know what SQL stands for? And I believe, I mean, this question itself is a bit of a hint if anybody wants to guess what something else we could try on the login page. But yeah, SQL will stand for Structured Query Language, I think. Yeah, Structured Query Language. And does anyone know what's a common associated vulnerability with it? Or at least like implementations of SQL, things that use SQL. Sometimes they have this specific vulnerability. Yeah, that's going to be an SQL injection. SQL injection simply means that, or for most parts of it, when it's present, it's a result of the programmer or whoever sort of created this application that utilizes a SQL server. Um, this program takes user input to pass into the SQL queries that it makes to the server. However, that user input isn't sanitized correctly in the sense that there are like malicious inputs that don't get filtered by an attacker, leading to data exfiltration and sometimes even command execution on the SQL server, since these are just queries being sent to a server. So if an attacker hijacks the queries and the queries go to the server, we're attacking whatever is running the server. Does anyone know what PII stands for? I forget this one a bit because like I usually run the two I's but not the P. It is going to stand for personally identifiable information. So basically information that is going to identify who you are and some other things. This could be like credit card addresses, social security, email stuff, think things like that. Does anyone actually know the OWASP top 10 classification for SQL injection? I don't actually know this one since I don't pay attention to OWASP that much. I'm not much of a web guy. Let's see if that answer is correct. It is AO3 2021 injection. Don't actually know what that stands for. I don't read into OWASP documentation all too much. As for the service and the version that's running on port 80, we already determined from our scan it's Apache HTTPD. The D stands for daemon. Daemon's like, I guess some sort of process or whatever. Usually the D is going to be an implication that's the server. So Apache HTTP server, 2438. Oh, and then there's parentheses Debian. So I guess that also indicates that this host is a Debian host. Does anyone know what's the standard port for HTTPS? Which is basically HTTP but secure, or at least with a layer of security. That's the S. Nothing really is truly secure. Oh yeah, there's gonna be 443. There's 443. Does anyone know what is considered, I guess, at least by Hack the Box, a luck-based of mechanism of or method of exploiting a login page? It was something I just tried out a little earlier. Brute forcing. That's just going to be guessing. That's really what it is. You're just guessing the password of a user or guessing a bunch of different username password combinations. And for the most part, this is typically targeted at one user, but like theoretically, if you have a list of a lot of credentials, you could just toss them all at it. When it comes to brute forcing a single user, though, that tends to be if there's a lockout policy, then you know that's how you can defend against this. And other times, people or web servers will implement some sort of uh, if there's too much traffic coming from one person, uh, then they'll block the IP, and that's one way to stop brute forcing. Unless the brute forcer is attacking from a lot of different hosts, then in that case, just simply locking out the account. That's usually the best way to go about preventing brute forcing. Does anyone know what a folder is called when people refer to web applications? So it's sort of like how we have folders here, like whatever all my blue stuff is. If I do stack L, the stuff with a D, those are, I mean, one term is folder, but there's a similar term used in the command line and for web servers. That's going to be directories. Since a lot, or at least to my understanding, like the original old web servers, they were essentially just public directories hosted on HTTP. So you just simply access the web server and it would just be like a file listing or just serving files on the computer of whatever directory the server was running out of. Does anyone know what happens when we get a not found error? Let's see if we can actually emulate that. Well, there's a not found error. I mean, it's not, it doesn't always show up in the request, but generally a 404 response is considered a not found. So HTTP deals with response codes. If I use curl, which stands for C, like C URL, so I could actually see the URL. If I run curl on the web server and just hit its link, I get a 200 OK. 200 usually means like, yeah, you're good. Like, here's your resource. If I try to do something that doesn't exist, I get there's my 404 right there. there's a tool so to do what's called brute forcing directories. So we see that there's I mean, if we just access the root of this web server, there's a login page, but there might be other endpoints that aren't visible to us immediately. There's the only button here is a lot, two buttons. There's a login and forget password. Forget password does nothing. And I don't see any of additional endpoints aside from the image and CSS files, but I don't really see any other endpoints accessible. So one technique attackers might do is they might do something called directory brute forcing. And there's a lot of tools for this. There's something called GoBuster, something called Ferox Buster. I prefer Ferox Buster, but we'll be using GoBuster for now. And I'm gonna need to install it, so okay. So in regards to that, does anyone know how we can use GoBuster to actually directory brute force? Well, GoBuster itself already does directory brute forcing. Uh, Actually, no, wait, no, I'm missing. So I was thinking Ferox Buster. For GoBuster, there are like modules, right? In the case they call it here, they call it switches, but there's these basic commands that allow you to try to brute force different things. So you can have virtual hosts, DNS subdomains, and in this case, we want to do directories. And then you do tech U to specify the URL, tech W to specify the path to a word list. In Kali, we have sec lists, and we also have word lists. I'll stick with derb, and I'll do big.txt because that's just one of my default go-to ones. If you want to speed up, we could do tech T to specify more threads. So like more operations. And I mean, it's going. If it finds something, it'll tell us. But for the most part, it's relatively silent. But on the web server ends of things, it's receiving tons of traffic. So here's like the little utilities that we saw the web server running. Uh, CSS, fonts, images, JavaScript, all these little folders that contain files just for it to function on at least on the client end and look a bit pretty. Doesn't look like there's anything too interesting. Oops. So anyways, we know that there's no other endpoints, and we also saw they were hinting towards to us to look towards some sort of SQL solution. Does anyone have any idea of if we can try to perform a SQL injection here? I'll try this one out. So this is like a relatively common payload. Just do semicolon double tack. Uh, Sometimes you do a pound sign too. Oh, looks like that one worked. And symbol that we use to comment out parts of the code. Yeah, in SQL it's going to be a pound sign or a double tack. SQL queries. Let's see if I have a SQL database. Okay, I don't. But SQL queries typically look like something like select name from and then it'll be like a table or like a part of the database. So let's select name from users where password equal, and then this is what we are entering in from the URL. So where username equal, in this case we said admin, and then password equal, let's just say admin. And it'll pass that query into the server. What we essentially did is that we kind of screwed up this whole query by putting a single quote to close off this quote, and then we're entering some sort of logical operator, and then we use the pound sign to comment out the rest of it. Normally the double tack works, but sometimes it doesn't. SQL injection is a lot of just guess and check, and sometimes you won't always get a response back. Like I can try again with the double tack, and sometimes they add a third tack. I don't actually know what that one does. But it looks like that one also works. Interesting. There's a good website or GitHub repo called Payload All the Things, as payloads for all the things. Uh, and then I believe one of them is gonna be about, yeah, SQL injection. It's pretty nice. We could just like, you know, look at the payloads, try them out. There's also a tool called SQL Map, which helps out automate that process. With SQL injection, you could do things like bypass login pages, but for other things, you can also exfiltrate data sometimes. It all depends on the situation. It's a lot of guessing and checking. So I'm gonna turn off this machine now, and I'm gonna spin up the next machine, but I think it's a good time to take a little bit of a break. Okay, spinning this one up. I'll give it about a little more than 5 minutes. Okay, looks like we'll be back, and I think it's gonna be our last one. And then next session we could take a crack at Crocodile Responder and 3. For Sql, funny name. Looks like it's gonna have to do with SQL. Would have guessed, but we already know the structure. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. We already went over that. And it looks like I'll start off with a scan of the box. Looks like we have one port running, 3306, which is common for SQL. SQL usually runs on 3306. And I'm just going to run a detailed scan because even though it's running SQL, there's different types of databases like Postgres, Maria, or just MySQL. So it's good to know which one we're dealing with because they have some variations between each one of them. Yeah, we see it's going to be 3306. I know Postgres uses a different syntax, or at least a slightly different syntax and structure than MySQL and Maria, but I don't actually really know too well the difference between MySQL and MariaDB. This scan's taking a bit of time. I don't think my box is done, is it? Oh, it's fine. I'm just gonna rerun the scan a little faster. Maybe that'll help us fix this issue. Let's see if we could do like, yeah, let's just try to go through the other tasks while this thing runs. Does anyone know how we could potentially interact with this SQL database? Whereas before we were interacting with it through an injection, over here, how can we actually connect to the database remotely? We can use the MySQL command, which is the client tool for the MySQL database. Specify a username. We can try to log. We could just do techu. Default one's going to be root. For some reason, you're not supposed to put a space between the U or between the flag and the value. I think it's kind of weird. That's just how it operates. Then P would be password. And then H isn't help. It's actually the host, I believe. It's kind of fun, weird like that. That's weird. It's just hanging. Maybe that's why my scans are being weird. Or it's not even responding. am going to reset the machine. Oh, wait. Okay. How- I need to turn the machine off. Whatever. I'll just reset it. So just let's just fill these out. Structured query. See, it's running 3306. Pretty sure you don't specify space anyways. Yeah, you don't. Well, I think that's actually for the password. For the U, I think it's just fine. It's weird. I don't know. Maybe I don't have that right IP address. 10.129 wants me. No, I think the right IP address. This box just refuses to respond. That is annoying. Oh, it's a bit of, well, not to give it away or anything, but I mean the tag says MariaDB and oh wait, oh finally it responded. It just takes 15 years. Yeah, it's running MariaDB. Looks like I accidentally authenticated with no username or password either. That's weird. I think by default it does the root user. And now put MariaDB. Okay, weird. And then to specify username, you do techie as I said. And then the one that we were able to log in with no password. I mean, by default, you log in as root. So I just do this again. I give it like 15 years. It should work. I don't know why it's so slow all of a sudden though. But give this a bit of time. Yeah, same thing. It's just gonna be root. Now, if we want to, does anyone know any like SQL commands or queries, I should say, not commands? Because now that we're connected to the database, we could run queries on it, or not the database, the server. SQL servers have multiple databases, and we can show them if we do show databases. The delimiter for each command is a semicolon. The three default ones usually see are like MySQL performance schema, information schema, and I believe there's another one, but I don't see that here actually. Looks like there's also one called HTB. If we actually want to use the database, it's just simple as use HTB. Does anyone know how we could look for more stuff regarding the database? Well, if we actually want to enumerate the database itself or get information about it, now that we're connected to it, the way SQL works is you have a database. The database has tables. And each table has rows, I believe, which contain data. So if we do show tables, these are the tables in the HTTP database. And if I do select wildcard usually means everything from table, and then put my semicolon, I can see that here are the rows in this table. So then we could just do wildcard if we want to query. and the delimiter is the semicolon. Looks like I accidentally cut the flag while showing you guys how to do that too. But let's say I do select that users. Oops, got from. See, there's some users, and then there's the flag. They have some other weird configurations. I have no idea what they're used for. But yeah, I think we could cut a bit early this. And we could take on these three next time. For the most part, this was just we were dealing with some client tools again. I don't know why they put Sql here if it's just if it fits in the category of tier 0. But yeah, just dealing with client tools, and in the case of appointment, it was actually trying to abuse a login page. So in the case of appointment, the service was a web server, and after using a tool to access it, in this case the web browser, we're able to see that it had a login page, and then we're able to abuse the poor coding practices by whoever made the login page of the web server. Yeah, that'll be it, and I think I'll end it here then. Just